My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 26 years old, and my story begins on the night I walked up the driveway to the house I thought was still mine. I had just returned from a business trip, tired and carrying nothing more than a suitcase and the relief of finally being home. But instead of comfort, I was met with the sound of strangers' voices echoing through my front yard. And then came the moment that shattered me. A man I had never seen before looked me in the eye and said, "We bought this place last week." White right pointing backhand index before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I remember freezing right there on the sidewalk. For a second, I thought maybe I was standing at the wrong house. But the red shutters, the chipped mailbox, the flower pots I'd set out months ago, all of it was mine. I knew every crack in that front porch because I had painted and repaired it myself. Yet somehow, everything felt foreign. A moving truck sat heavy in the driveway. Its back door was wide open, and two men carried a sofa down the ramp, their boots thudding against the wooden planks. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. That wasn't my furniture. That wasn't my sofa. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice trembling before I even realized it. The two men glanced at me but didn't stop. Behind them, a woman stepped out of the doorway, juggling a stack of picture frames against her chest. She was laughing with a child trailing behind her. A family. In my house. What? What are you doing? My words broke out half as a whisper. The woman turned, her laughter dying when she saw me. She gave me a polite but puzzled smile, the kind people wear when they assume you're lost. "Oh, hi. Are you here for the realtor?" "The what?" I stammered. "The realtor. We just closed on this place. You must be with the agent." Her words didn't make sense. Closed? Bought? This place? My stomach churned so hard it felt like the ground might give way beneath me. "No. This is my house," I said, louder this time, as if volume could make it real. That was when a man stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, clearly the husband. He glanced at his wife and then back at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. We purchased this home legally last week. The deed is signed. We've been moving in all day." I shook my head in disbelief, my fingers gripping the handle of my suitcase so tightly my knuckles went white. "That's impossible. I own this house. I bought it 3 years ago. This is my home." He sighed the way someone does when they think you're being unreasonable. "I'm sorry, but maybe you should call your realtor. The paperwork's all in order. This isn't your property anymore." The world tilted. My heart pounded so violently it drowned out the sound of boxes being shuffled around behind him. I wanted to scream, to push past him and run into the kitchen, the living room, my bedroom, to prove it was still mine. But before I could speak again, I heard a voice I knew too well. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," my father said, strolling out from around the side of the house. My breath caught. He was carrying a set of keys, my keys, dangling them loosely in his hand like a trophy. Right behind him was my mother, and then, a few steps later, my younger brother, Ryan, wearing sunglasses even though it was nearly dark. My whole body went cold. "Dad? Mom? Ryan? What's happening here?" I asked, my voice breaking. Dad smirked. "What's happening is, your house was just sitting here while you were off playing businesswoman. We made a better use of it." I blinked at him in disbelief. "You sold my house? Without even asking me?" Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. She adjusted the strap of her purse and stayed at the pavement. Ryan, on the other hand, looked smug, like a kid who had just gotten away with something. "Relax, Sarah. It's not the end of the world. The money went to something important." My voice rose, shaking with rage. Important? What could possibly be more important than the home I worked years to buy? Ryan took off his sunglasses and grinned. "A once-in-a-lifetime trip. Bora Bora. Jet skis, luxury villas, the whole deal. You should have seen it." I felt my chest tighten, the air leaving my lungs in one sharp, painful rush. My parents had sold the one thing I owned outright, the place I had sacrificed for, just so my brother could play rich tourist for a week? The husband of the new family cleared his throat awkwardly. Look, maybe this is something you all should discuss privately. But I barely heard him. My ears were ringing. My hands shook so hard I had to set my suitcase down before it slipped from my grip. I looked back at the house, my house, and for a moment I remembered every drop of sweat I had poured into it. I remembered painting the living room walls late at night with music playing softly in the background. I remembered the first time I turned the key in the front door, how proud I had been. I remembered planting the little rose bush in the yard, the one now trampled beneath the wheels of the moving truck. All of it, all the hours of work, all the sacrifices I had made, was gone. Sold. Erased in one selfish decision. I turned back to my family, tears blurring my vision. How could you do this to me? I trusted you. Dad shrugged, as if it were nothing. You'll get over it. You're young. You'll bounce back. But in that moment, standing in the driveway of the house that was no longer mine, something inside me shifted. Their betrayal didn't just hurt. It woke something in me I didn't know was there. I realized I couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. And I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of a fight I was determined to win. The silence that followed my father's words felt louder than the creak of the old floor beneath my shoes. Your house covered their fun, he had said, the grin carved into his face like it was meant to hurt, meant to dig deep into my chest and twist. For a second, I just stood there, staring at him, waiting for someone, anyone, to break the tension. But no one did. Not my mother, who sat quietly at the edge of the couch with her arms folded. Not my brother, who leaned back in his chair as though this whole thing was amusing to him. You sold my home, I whispered, my throat dry. It wasn't even a question. The truth hung heavy in the room, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake off. Dad tilted his head, almost smug. It was never really yours, sweetheart. Not truly. You think just because you worked a few years and bought that place, it made you separate from this family. He leaned forward, voice dropping lower. You owe us, and now you've paid. Something cracked inside me right then. Not anger, not yet, but something colder. I glanced at my mom, hoping for a flicker of defense, even a small shake of her head. Instead, she avoided my eyes. Her silence screamed louder than my father's words. Why? My voice shook. Why would you do this to me? It was my brother, Eric, who finally spoke. He sat forward, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from his sleeve. Because we deserved it. You've always acted like you're better than us, living in that house all on your own, coming around only when it suited you. Well, while you were gone, we actually enjoyed life for once. Bora Bora was, he paused and smiled to himself. Amazing. Best time of my life. The way he said it, so casual, so entitled, lit a spark in me. That house had been my dream. I'd spent years working double shifts, saving every penny to make it mine. And to hear that it had been traded away for cocktails and sunbuns made my hands tremble. I didn't trust my voice, so I didn't speak. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, needing distance. But even there, the sound of their laughter followed me, Eric retelling parts of his trip like it was the funniest story ever told. I gripped the counter and forced myself to breathe. When I returned, my mom was standing now, smoothing her skirt nervously. It's done, Emily, she said softly. There's no point in dwelling on it. No point. My chest tightened. That house was mine. Every nail, every wall, every hour I worked to keep it standing, it was mine. And you sold it like it was disposable. Mom's lips pressed together, her eyes flicking toward Dad, then back to me. Families share. That's how it's always been. You should understand that. Her words cut deeper than she knew. Share! This wasn't sharing. This was theft disguised as family loyalty. And the worst part was, they didn't even see it. Dad rose slowly, his grin fading into something sharper. "You'll bounce back. You always do. Maybe this will humble you a little." That word, humble, landed like a slap. They thought my independence was arrogance. They thought my success was some kind of insult to them. I should have screamed. I should have let the anger spill over. But instead, I just stood there, staring at the people who were supposed to be my family and realizing they weren't anymore. The rest of the evening blurred into fragments. Eric showing off pictures on his phone, Mom pretending to fuss with the curtains, Dad pouring himself another drink as if nothing monumental had just happened. But inside me, something shifted permanently. Later that night, when they had all gone quiet, I slipped outside. The air was sharp and cool, the kind that cut through fabric and touched skin directly. I sat on the porch steps, hugging myself, staring at the driveway where my car sat like the last piece of me they hadn't taken. My mind replayed every memory tied to that house. Painting the walls a soft cream, fixing the leaky faucet myself because I couldn't afford a plumber. The nights I lay awake hearing the creaks and learning to feel safe within them. That home had been more than shelter. It was proof I could stand on my own. And they had ripped it away like it meant nothing. I thought about leaving then, just walking away and never looking back. But something rooted me to that spot. Maybe it was the sting of betrayal. Maybe it was the quiet fury that had begun to rise. Whatever it was, I knew one thing clearly. I couldn't let them see me break. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices drifting from the kitchen. I paused at the doorway, listening. "She'll get over it," Dad was saying, his voice low but firm. "And if she doesn't," Mom whispered back, "she doesn't have a choice. We did what we had to. She'll fall in line eventually." Those words sealed it. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a resource, a bank, a fallback plan. And now that I had nothing left to give, they expected me to just accept it. I stepped into the kitchen, forcing my voice steady. "You're wrong." They both turned, startled. "You think I'll fall in line," I continued, meeting my father's eyes. "But you've mistaken me for someone who still belongs here." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand, stopping him. "I don't." For the first time, his confidence faltered. Just a flicker, but I saw it. And that was enough. I left the house soon after, my car carrying me down familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. The betrayal clung to me like smoke, impossible to shake off. But underneath it, a quiet determination stirred. They thought they had ended me. They thought selling my home had broken me. But they had no idea what they had just started. The road stretched out before me in silence, the hum of the tires on asphalt steadying the storm inside my chest. My family's voices still echoed in my ears, their laughter, their justifications, their betrayal. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, each mile pulling me farther from them, closer to something I couldn't yet name but knew I needed: answers. By the time I reached the edge of town, my jaw ached from clenching it so long. I didn't have a plan, not really, but I had an instinct, and it tugged me straight toward the place I'd avoided since Dad passed away, the county records office. That building had always felt like a mausoleum of paperwork, endless files buried in gray cabinets. But now it felt like the only place where their lies could be stripped bare. The glass doors groaned when I pushed them open. Inside, the air was cool, tinged with the faint scent of old paper and toner. Rows of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a pale glow. A woman at the front desk looked up from her computer, her expression bored, until she met my eyes. Something in the way I carried myself must have told her I wasn't here for routine business. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but distant. "Yes," I said quickly. "I need to see property records. Specifically, ownership transfers for the last 12 months. She arched a brow. "That's a wide range. Do you have an address?" The words caught in my throat, but I forced them out. "Yes, 814 Crestwood Lane." Recognition flickered across her face, but she didn't comment. Instead, she handed me a form to fill out. My hands shook slightly as I scribbled down the details. my pen pressing hard enough to dent the paper. Minutes later, she disappeared into the back, leaving me to sit with my racing thoughts. I tapped my fingers against the armrest, remembering every inch of that house, every corner I'd painted myself, every crack in the ceiling I'd learned to live with. My house. My sanctuary. When the clerk returned, she carried a thin folder. She slid it across the desk toward me. That's everything tied to that property in the last year. Please review it here. I opened it cautiously, almost afraid of what I'd find. The first few pages were standard, my original deed, my name printed in bold letters that once gave me so much pride. But then came a document that made my chest tighten, a transfer of ownership, notarized, stamped, official. My father's signature, my mother's witness mark. And nowhere, absolutely nowhere, was mine. Heat rose in my cheeks. My pulse thudded so hard I could hear it. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had erased me. I flipped through more pages, searching for loopholes, mistakes, anything. That's when I noticed something strange. The sale wasn't listed as a standard purchase. It was filed under something else, family reassignment. The phrase looked wrong, almost invented, like a technical smokescreen. I leaned closer, tracing the notary's name with my finger. It was familiar. Too familiar. Mrs. Green. She'd lived 3 doors down from us when I was a child. She'd watched me ride my bike, had brought us cookies during the holidays. And now her signature was here, validating the theft of everything I'd built. Anger coursed through me, hot and steady. I wanted to march to her house and demand answers. But instead, I copied down the file number, every date, every name. My father always taught me to fight clean, to fight with facts. If he thought I'd forgotten that lesson, he was wrong. The clerk watched me with cautious curiosity. Did you find what you were looking for? I closed the folder, my voice low but steady. More than I expected. Outside, the sunlight felt harsh, too bright against the weight in my chest. I sat in my car, the papers spread across the passenger seat like evidence in a trial. For a long time, I just stared at them, my mind spinning with possibilities. If they'd lied about this, what else had they hidden? The next stop was the bank. I walked inside with the same determination, though my stomach churned with unease. The teller smiled politely as I requested transaction histories linked to my accounts, particularly anything tied to the house. At first, she hesitated, citing privacy. But when I slid my ID across the counter and explained I suspected unauthorized activity, her expression shifted. She disappeared into the back, returning with printouts. My breath caught when I scanned the pages. Multiple withdrawals, large ones, made just weeks before the house was transferred. My signature was forged, and poorly. The strokes were clumsy, rushed. Anyone who knew my handwriting would have seen the difference immediately. The room tilted for a moment, a dizzying wave of betrayal sweeping over me. My family hadn't just taken my house. They'd taken my money, too. "Are you all right?" the teller asked gently. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, thank you. This helps more than you know." I walked out, clutching the papers like a lifeline. The air outside felt different now, sharper, colder. The world had tilted on its axis, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever find steady ground again. Back in my car, I spread the documents across the dashboard, piecing the story together like a puzzle. The forged signatures, the suspicious notary, the transfers disguised under obscure legal terms. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to care enough to connect the dots. And that someone was me. I drove to a quiet park on the edge of town, away from the noise, away from anyone who might see the storm gathering inside me. Sitting on a bench, I let the papers flutter in the breeze as I read them again, every line searing itself into my memory. The betrayal no longer felt abstract. It was ink on paper, numbers in a ledger, signatures that didn't belong to me. It was real, undeniable, and it was mine to expose. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the grass, I realized something. My family had underestimated me. They thought I'd break, thought I'd walk away quietly. But now I had something stronger than anger. I had proof. And proof was power. The papers trembled in my hands as the evening breeze tugged at the edges. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof. For a long time, I sat on that park bench, watching the sky darken, wondering what kind of person signs away their own blood with a smake and a forged name. I could have gone to the police. I could have hired an attorney. But none of that would bring me peace until I looked them in the eyes and forced them to see me, not as the quiet child they thought they could silence, but as someone who had finally found her voice. By the time I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, night had swallowed the neighborhood. The porch light glowed, warm and inviting, a cruel disguise for the truth inside. My chest tightened as I killed the engine. This wasn't my house anymore, not on paper, but it would always be mine in ways no document could erase. I walked up the steps slowly, each footfall echoing in my ears. Before I could knock, the door creaked open. My mother stood there, her face illuminated by the yellow glow of the hallway lamp. Her smile was small, mocking. "Well, look who finally decided to come back," she said. I held up the folder of documents, my voice cutting through the stale air. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she turned, gesturing for me to enter. "Fine. Let's talk." The living room looked the same as it always had, the same worn sofa, the same family photos on the wall, the same scent of lemon polish. But now, it all felt foreign, like I was stepping into a stage set. My father sat in his recliner, arms folded across his chest. My brother leaned against the wall, scrolling on his phone as if my presence bored him already. I dropped the folder onto the coffee table. The papers fanned out like a deck of cards, every page screaming the truth they thought they had buried. "You forged my name. You drained my account. You signed away the house. I have everything right here." My father didn't flinch. He simply stared at me, his jaw tight. "What's your tone?" "My tone?" My voice cracked with disbelief. "You stole from me, and you want to talk about my tone?" My mother crossed her arms, leaning back on the sofa as if she'd been preparing for this moment. "We did what had to be done. You were reckless, wasting time, wasting potential. We protected the family." "You mean you protected yourselves?" I snapped. My brother finally looked up, his smile slicing through me. "You really think anyone's going to believe you over us? You've always been dramatic, always the victim." I stepped closer to him, pointing at the forged withdrawal slips. "That's not drama. That's fraud. That's a crime." For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed his face. He shoved his phone in his pocket, straightening against the wall. My father's voice boomed, low and heavy. "Enough. You don't come into this house and throw around accusations. You think those papers will save you? We've been in this town our whole lives. People know us. They'll side with us before they ever side with you." The word stung because part of me knew he was right. But another part of me, stronger than the fear, burned with defiance. I leaned over the table, my finger pressing down on the notarized transfer. "You can spin whatever story you want, but ink doesn't lie, and neither do signatures." The room went still. My mother's eyes flicked to the paper, her composure cracking for just a second. "You don't understand the bigger picture," she whispered. "Then explain it," I challenged. "Explain why you had to erase me from everything Dad and I built. Explain why you thought I'd never fight back." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, my father stood, his shadow looming across the room. His voice dropped, calm but edged with threat. "You think you've won something because you dug through files? You don't know the half of it. Some battles aren't fought with paper. They're fought with power, and we hold that." I felt my knees weaken, but I didn't move. I locked eyes with him, refusing to blink. "Maybe you do. But tonight, I walked in with something you never expected. Courage. And that's one thing you can't sign away." My mother shifted uneasily. "Don't do this," she murmured, her tone suddenly less sharp, almost pleading. I caught it, the first crack in her armor. She wasn't as untouchable as she wanted me to believe. I leaned back, gathering the documents, my movements slow and deliberate. You've already done this, I said, and now I'm going to make sure the world sees it. My brother scoffed, but his voice wavered. You're bluffing. Am I? I held up the withdrawal slips, the forged signatures bold under the lamplight. One copy is enough to start an investigation, and I have more than one. My father's jaw clenched. For the first time, he looked unsure, like he couldn't calculate his way out of this moment. I slid the folder back under my arm, stepping toward the door. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in my ears, but my voice stayed steady. You told me this wasn't my home anymore. Fine, but you'll never erase the truth. And the truth is coming. No one spoke as I opened the door. The night air hit me like a rush of freedom, cool and sharp against my burning skin. Behind me, I heard my mother exhale shakily, my father mutter something under his breath, my brother curse softly. The empire of control was cracking, and they knew it. As I walked down the driveway, the papers pressed tight against my chest, I realized the confrontation hadn't ended inside those walls. It had only just begun. The night air still clung to me as I walked down the street, my heartbeat refusing to calm. I didn't look back, not once. Their porch light glowed faintly behind me, a reminder of the life I had walked away from. But this time, I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Tucked under my arm was the truth. Proof of what they had done. Proof that I still had a claim, no matter how hard they tried to erase me. By the time I reached my car, my hands had stopped shaking. Anger had burned through the fear, leaving something sharper in its place. Resolve. I slid into the driver's seat, the papers rustling as if urging me forward. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the hunter. The next morning, I found myself outside the county clerk's office. The building wasn't much, just a squat brick structure with cloudy windows, but it held the power of records, signatures, and stamps that could either bury me or vindicate me. I pushed the door open, the scent of paper and old carpet greeting me. A receptionist glanced up from her desk. Can I help you? I need to file a complaint for fraudulent property transfer, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Her brows rose slightly, but she didn't question me. Take a seat. Someone will call you. The wait stretched endlessly. My fingers drummed against the folder in my lap, each second reminding me of everything I had lost. When my name was finally called, I stood quickly, almost too quickly, and followed a middle-aged man in a rumpled shirt into his office. He introduced himself as Mr. Hall, then gestured for me to sit. You said you believe your property was transferred without consent. I laid the documents across his desk one by one, like laying down cards in a game where the stakes were everything. Forged signatures, withdrawal slips, notarized transfers, all of it. His eyes narrowed as he flipped through them. This is significant, he murmured. Do you have proof these signatures aren't yours? I swallowed. Yes, I can provide handwriting samples. And I have witnesses who know I wasn't even in the state on the dates listed. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You understand this won't be quick. There will be hearings, maybe a trial. It could get ugly. I don't care if it gets ugly, I said, my voice steady. I just want what's mine. His gaze lingered on me for a moment before he nodded. Then let's start the process. Walking out of that office, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was moving forward. But taking back what was mine wasn't just about paperwork. It was about walking into spaces they told me I no longer belonged and reclaiming them piece by piece. That afternoon, I drove out to the farm. The driveway was rutted with fresh tire tracks, the fields unkempt, fences sagging where no one had bothered to mend them. My chest ached at the sight. This land had been my sanctuary, the place where my father and I spent countless hours working side by side. Seeing it neglected felt like another betrayal. I parked near the barn and stepped out, the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes echoing in the stillness. The doors groaned as I pushed them open. Inside, dust swirled through beams of sunlight. The tools were scattered, left to rust. The old tractor sat in the corner, its once bright paint dulled. I walked slowly, running my fingers over the worn workbench, memories crashing in, my father's laugh, the smell of engine oil, the way he always called the farm our legacy. My throat tightened. They had tried to erase me from this place, but the ghosts of what we built still lived in every nail, every board, every acre. "I'm taking it back," I whispered into the silence. A sound behind me made me turn. My brother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression smug. "Thought you might show up," he said. "You think walking in here makes it yours again?" "It was never yours to begin with," I shot back. He stepped inside, his boots crunching against the dirt floor. "You're wasting your time. Dad's got people on his side. You'll never win." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Maybe not. But you'd be surprised what truth can do when it finally comes to light." For a moment, his smirk wavered. He turned, muttering under his breath as he walked away, but the tension he carried told me he wasn't as confident as he pretended. I stayed in the barn long after he left, cleaning the workbench, stacking tools, sweeping dust. Small acts, maybe, but each one felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. They could forge papers, but they couldn't forge memories. They couldn't touch the bond one had with this place. Over the next week, I balanced court filings with visits to the farm. Every time I returned, I worked a little longer, patching a fence, clearing weeds, fixing what I could with my own hands. Neighbors started to notice. Mr. Collins from down the road stopped by one afternoon, leaning against his truck as he watched me hammer a loose board back into place. "Didn't think I'd see you back here," he said, a half smile tugging at his lips. "I'm not going anywhere this time," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Good. This land always fit you better than the rest of them." His words settled deep inside me, a quiet validation I hadn't realized I needed. Every day I returned, I felt stronger, surer. Taking back what was mine wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about planting my feet where they tried to uproot me and saying, "I belong here." And as I stood in the fields one evening, the sun sinking low, painting the horizon in gold, I knew this was only the beginning. The fight wasn't over, but I had already started reclaiming piece by piece what they tried to steal.